RJ, do you want to start?
Well, it began for me the day that it was announced that BTS was going into the military to fulfill their requirement for mandatory service. And Jane said to me, "I'm going to make a film. I want us to make a film about what happens when they come out of the army." And that was 4 years ago. And then, on some level, the next thing I knew, the film was being made. How'd you do it, Jane?
Well, I think I bugged James Shin a lot, is how it happened. So James and I had James, who is the head of Hybe America TV and Film, and I had become friendly, and I just kept on saying, "Oh, it's such a good story. It's such a good story. I really, really want to do a documentary about when they come back. Did you hear me, James? I really want to do a documentary about it." And so I would just keep on pestering him every few months. And Bao and I had developed, and we were trying to find a project to work on together. And it was very lucky that it came together for this one.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it in the beginning of my intro where when I first saw them at the SoFi show, there was something really magical in that show and just their connection to Army and that sort of mythical storytelling that I always think about, that, Army was like Penelope and the Odyssey and BTS was like Odysseus. And so, yeah, it just happened that, James called me and it's like, well, they're coming back. Like, would you be interested in doing it? And to be completely honest, I was like very busy at that time, and I had to like talk to my team. I was like, I think I can do it. Like, it's like a very like, specific time frame, right? It's not like then that's what I love about the story. It's like, Jane says it so eloquently in a lot of Q&As that usually films are, especially music films, are about the beginning of an artist's career or the end, and this is snap right in the middle of it. And so to be able to tell such a pivotal moment in their career was really an honor and a privilege.
I will say, watching it, you couldn't help but realize or think how mythic your storytelling was here. It may not be the Odyssey, but it's certainly a mythic tale. Yeah. Maybe Sisyphus.
It's definitely there when you're watching it. But I'm curious, as you mentioned, like time, like how much time did you actually have with them? And then we'll talk a little bit about them getting the cinematography credits, because they shot a lot of stuff on the camcorders too.
I mean, over the sort of, we kind of, they had a span of 4 months where they like kind of completed the album. There's 2 months in LA and then a couple months in Korea. And then within that time, we had like a month of shooting with them. But for me, it was like really important that the story started when Jin joined, when it became fully, OT7, as they say, where it's all 7 together. I think if it was like 5 out of 7 or 6 out of 7, it's not really them returning. Of course, we wanted to make sure that we captured the parts where they were still recording, even though Jin was on his solo tour. And we knew that we couldn't get access to them 24/7. So I just had this idea of like, what if we gave them their own like camcorders, their own mini DV camcorders? I mean, I know that they, shoot their own content on their phone, but nowadays, like, that's a very specific visual language. And I wanted to like evoke like your brother or your mother or your uncle like filming a vacation or something. And so this is like their vacation in LA, and so to give them the cameras, there added this texture that I think is very intimate.
I mean, that's the one thing that I love, but like, what directive did you give them when you gave them the camcorders? Were you like, I need you to be filming 24/7?
I mean, it's interesting, like the first conversation I had with the group, there were certain members who, it's just like seeing them sort of debate Arirang. Like, I think coming into it, you just think that they're a monolith. They're just BTS, but they're so like distinct individually, and they all had their opinion. Like certain members, like, we should capture everything. Like, I'm just gonna like roll it like Big Brother or something. And other members are much more like quiet, and they want their privacy. So I mean, I just, whatever we can get from them, I was happy with. I didn't give them too many directives. I just tried to teach them how to use the camera, and that was a kind of a hurdle in itself.
I'm curious. I mean, the one scene that really struck me the first time I watched it was like when they're at the table early on, talking about the pressure of the return, and like, you know, are the fans still gonna love us? What was that like for you as filmmakers to capture, you know, to see that moment and capture that and understand the weight of the crown that they're wearing, which we see again at the end?
Yeah, I mean, RJ and This Machine, they've done so many great music documentaries, and you know, when you're coming into a story, especially about the biggest band in the world, you just kind of think that, oh, they got it. It's just they're gonna nail it right away. And we came slightly later in the process where they had picked a lot of songs and they were tweaking. So my fear was like, oh, we're just gonna capture like people at their best doing their best, which is not the best type of storytelling and drama. But within the first couple of days, like, you know, we had live translation when we were filming, but when I was sort of like watching the footage afterwards, you can see and hear this pressure, this challenge, like this tension that they had. And I was like, great, like I want that tension from the start. And so we were very lucky, and there was that built-in drama that, you know, again, heavy as a crown, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very singular story because there's not that many bands that have to stop down at the height of their popularity, and then the anticipation of their comeback is so huge. But for them, I mean, after the time away, they have to figure out how they're different, how they interact differently as individuals, as a group, how much do they want to change. They talk about that a lot because it's high stakes. They want to create something new and exciting and push themselves, but at the same time, they want to remain the band that people love and adore. So it's difficult. That's not an easy task.
And it's one of the things that makes this film, I think, so rare is that it's existential. It gets into the guts of what it means to be BTS and how that relates to what it means to be each of them individually. And that's a very rare thing to see with a band, with a legendary band. And it's few and far between the films and the music documentary canon that you can think of that do that. You know, this is a really beautiful film. I mean, you guys have you're among the first to see it, but people are going to be watching this movie for decades to come.
There's real poignancy to watching those quiet moments. You know, when they're watching the concert, and you know, as they're younger, looking back on their younger selves. And then, you know, we see them in the recording studio putting this album together. How are you striking those moments of balance for, like, there's comedy here because they're hilarious to watch, and then there's like real dramatic moments. Like, talk about that editing process.
I mean, kudos to our editors. Many of them were here. But yeah, I mean, we knew that this film wasn't going to be this like retrospective film on the history of BTS. We wanted to like get into the story as quickly as possible, but at the same time, you have to give a little context to like where they've been and sort of where they're going with this album. And again, just sort of harkening back to the idea of like home video footage, of like sitting with your family and watching old home video footage. You know, there's this, they lived in a nice house, they rented a nice house in LA. And so they had this screening room, and we're just like, well, I asked them like, do you ever use it? And they're like, sometimes we use it. And it's like, well, would you be interested in like, you know, just looking at your old videos and things like that? And they were totally down. And I think for me, there's sort of like an economics of storytelling there, where you can get them being like very candid about their experience. Like, I love when RM says like, please stop, like, right? I was like, no, we're not going to stop, we're just going to keep on going. But you know, when you're seeing yourself younger, it's hard to watch, but at the same time, for us as an audience, you really see that transformation from, you know, they spent half their lives together, and seeing them you know, slightly more mature and older. I think that was important in kind of giving the whole context, and then the moments of fun and laughter just came through as, you know, 7 brothers in a way, just playing around with each other. and laughing and creating. It was really beautiful.
Well, you've got 7 people, and in 93 minutes, I feel like every single one of them, like the love was divided between all 7 of them. How did you get, that's not easy to nail. How did you make sure that you gave equal time to every single member of the band?
I'll take that one. I mean, it was important because I think one of the things that I was worried about is like not distinguishing each individual member. I think sometimes, again, people just think of them as BTS and not as RM. I'm not going to name all the names because but like they're so different individually, and so if we were going to shoot a personal scene with one member, then we would make sure that we get a personal scene with all of them. And even the car rides, we had specific questions for them, but I also asked like baseline questions because I wanted to understand how they each had a different opinion about the same topic. And that was like an easy, I wouldn't say easy, but it was an effective way to kind of distinguish themselves creatively and sort of their different opinions.
And Jane, I'd love to ask you this question. Like, this is being done verite style. You've no idea what's going to happen next. Talk about like going in with this, the one idea that you had, and then how that pivoted as you got the footage, as as Al started to shoot everything too, and did it shift at all?
I mean, I think we didn't quite know what to expect in terms of how their process would be. And they really were kind of racing against the clock because Army had been waiting a long time and they were not going to wait anymore. So we had to make this March deadline. So there really was pressure on them. It really was high stakes. And what I was surprised by was their genuine, deep affection and feeling for each other. They really are so sweet with each other. They love spending time together. That time together is not an obligation. It feels like a treasured reward for them. And so I thought that was very moving. And then I also find very moving the process of making art and the stops and starts and the days when you feel like it's not working at all, and then the triumphs when something sounds incredible. And so when I hear this final album, Bao and I just came from the live show where we were up and dancing and singing along to every song because you feel emotionally invested when you watch something being created. So I think they did, as they say, there's some absolute bangers on there.
That album, I've just had it on repeat for like since it dropped. But the other thing that I really love is just this environment where they're really vulnerable and open, and there's a trust. How did you create that space for them to be completely free?
Oh, that's all you, man.
I mean, it wasn't easy, especially to start with, because, we come, we walk in the line of a long lineage of filmmakers and storytellers who have done past films about BTS, and mostly have been internal or Korean. And so HYBE really took a chance with us to come into this world that's very different from our own. And there was a lot of sort of letter writing. I don't think I've written so much in my filmmaking career, but I understood the reason behind it. It's like understanding what the artistic intention and the creative intention was, and it's helped me sort of hone my vision of the film. And so we had these conversations where the group were like, well, what's the point of this documentary? And like, for me, sometimes like I'm just making it and the point comes out in the editing. But yeah, again, I got to sharpen what the idea was, and I was like, this is a moment in your, this is one chapter, and I want to just capture this time, and that's it. And like, what does this chapter means to the sort of the larger story of BTS? And because of that sort of honesty in the beginning, they opened up. I mean, it was, again, like any film, it's a process, but I think there was also sort of like these technical things that we did. Our cinematographer Caleb Heller's here too, and so like Caleb and I, you would typically maybe just do this more handheld and try to be free, but for the first week we were mostly on like tripod on sticks. Like there was a lot of people in those recording studios, and we would just be against the wall and have like a long lens, and we try to be as observational as possible. And by kind of giving space, you actually build proximity and intimacy with the camera many times. And we would shoot them at home while they were eating, and again trying to be as observational as possible. And they had pretty like banger meals too every night, and so we were really hungry, and like they could hear our stomach growl, and they would just be like, come eat. It's like, we can't eat. So I'd immediately order like Korean barbecue as soon as I got home. But yeah, it's just like giving them that space where the camera feels invisible, and then they start to let you into their world even more as we continue to film.
I do want to give credit to the guys, because when we first met them on one of those early days in the studio, they said, we're down for this. We want this to feel different. We want it to be different. So I think you can't make that without the subject's buy-in. So I think that was really important.
I was going to say, RJ, I'm going to start with you. Like, how did your perception of BTS change after, after this documentary?
Oh well, I was fully exposed from a position of ignorance. That's how I would describe my perception. When Jane first mentioned the idea to me, I was like, BTS. So it went like that. I went from of course I was aware of the band, and I knew what they were, but I'm certainly not ARMY. But now I'm ARMY adjacent. I'm ARMY by marriage and by film. I mean, I think greatest role here is a cheerleader and admirer of the art of this film. As a producer, we did everything we possibly could. You talk about the time frame, and Jane said that ARMY couldn't wait. ARMY couldn't wait, and that meant that Netflix couldn't wait. and it meant that we as a production company needed to, do everything in our power to make this, to help make this possible. And we did, because we love this film so much. We're such fans. So that's what happened. I became a fan of BTS, an even bigger fan of Bao Nguyen, the filmmaker.
Jane, as an ARMY, how did your perception change?
Well, no, I didn't. I don't want to get in trouble, but I didn't start as ARMY because I liked the music, but I wouldn't describe myself as ARMY because that's a whole other level. But I mean, I guess I did become it. I mean, I'm so into this album, but I mean, I would say that I got really, you fall in love with these guys when you watch this movie, because they are so sweet and dedicated. They're responsible, like, to each other, to their fans. They care so much. So I think that when you're watching these scenes, like the scenes when they're watching their old videos or any of the dinner scenes, you see the whole range of emotions. They're funny, and they're making jokes with each other, but then they really do. They think a lot about their legacy in motion. I mean, that's what Bo Young talks about is this huge amount of achievement that they've already come to, and now what? So I think I love that. I love people who are trying to be the best at what they do and just to be the best.
So I'm 6 years ARMY and counting. Okay, so establishing the cred. But I mean, again, when I saw them live, that was a very life-changing experience for me, and it's a sort of origin of this film, the genesis of this film. But I think what I knew that they had so much pressure to their fans and sort of the music world because they're the biggest band in the world. But it wasn't until witnessing their conversations together about representing Korea, having to be these cultural ambassadors to an entire nation. I think that makes them unique from many other musical artists out there. Like, to carry the weight and carry this crown, as RM says in the film, and represent a country to the entire world. Like it reminds me of sort of how, you know, many hyphenated Americans also have to like transcend their identity as both, you know, for me, Asian and American, and what that means. And they're able to do it with such grace of being, you know, they're Korean, but they're Korean icons, but they're also global icons. And does it mean to kind of have to balance those sort of like heavy burdens and heavy responsibilities? But in many ways, I think they realize it's such a privilege to be that. And you know, it's hard for them to wear the crown individually, but as a group of 7, they're able to do it. And that was sort of one of the main themes of the film.
Last question. I'm just curious, how many hours of footage? I've got to ask that footage question. Did you have?
We've got our assistant editors here. Like, how many hours of footage? Like, lots.
No, but it was almost like 40 terabytes of footage.
40 terabytes. Yeah.
Wow.
Put that in a headline.
It is such an incredible documentary that's made us fall in love with BTS even more, but also the power of storytelling and filmmaking. So I want to say thank you so much for that insight. Thank you to Netflix. Thank you to Hyde. I thank you to the crew that worked on the film, and to everybody coming out tonight. Spread the word, because BTS Return is on Netflix
At midnight tonight, Pacific Standard Time. So tell your friends.